Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to the members of the steering committee, to which I report. Provides me very valuable guidance in the work I'm doing as your governance council. And so Gaji, as our president, why don't you begin, and then we'll ask Mickey and the other members to make introductory comments.
Well, I will definitely keep it brief because I failed to have my first cup of coffee, and I'm gonna rectify that situation immediately. But welcome everyone. Board members, as you all know, this was a decision that we made about over a year ago to intentionally work on doing some board training. We selected Dr. Edie to help us do that. So I will turn it over to the other members of the steering committee for comments, but welcome everyone and let's get started.
Great. Mickey?
No, I would just second that. Really excited to have everybody here. This has been a long journey to get here. COVID has messed up a lot of things. This is one of them, and I wish we could all be in person. I know we're getting closer to that, but in lieu of that, I hope everyone will buy into the digital approach to this, and we can hopefully come out of here with a plan as a board that can move into the next board as they get elected this year, that can really help our governance structures get stronger. That's the goal, so that the board, the superintendent, the staff are all working closer together. We're clear on what the protocols are, and it just helps elevate our ability to govern the school system. So thank you, everybody. I know it's a lot to take 3 hours out of your day, so we appreciate it.
But there'll be 3 fun-filled hours. Let's see, is Terry here? I don't.
No.
Well, I see Sonia. Would you like to say a few words wherever you're? There you are.
Yes. Okay. I'll be brief. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hope everyone gets a lot out of this, and I'm super excited to get started.
Great. And our Chief Executive Officer, the Superintendent, Mark.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I will also be brief. I look forward to the next 3 hours. I think that at the end of this process, we will have a document or a set of rules that help us be the best that we can be, so that we can take that momentum and use that to propel Birmingham City Schools, the Birmingham City School System forward. So thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mark. I recommend, unless anyone objects, because we, in a sense, are the governing family. I'm, of course, an outside invited guest for the occasion, but I suggest we be on a first name basis from beginning to end with no exceptions. I'm Doug, and that's what I prefer as my first name. I don't know you all well, but if no one objects, can we proceed on that basis?
No objection.
So we will not use titles, we'll use first names and have an appropriately informal 3 hours together. Now, I'm keenly aware as your governance council and facilitator, to the extent we need one over the next 3 hours, that I do not bring off these meetings alone. Oh, I am so keenly aware of that, I can't tell you. And I need to acknowledge a couple of people. I've already mentioned the steering committee, which has given me invaluable input and helped me do the job I've been retained to do. But I must thank Angelia Strode, who's just been magnificent in providing me support. Zooming for the past 12 months has aged me a bit prematurely, but I would be much older looking if it weren't for Angelia. She's made my job a lot easier, so thank you, Angelia. And I also want to acknowledge someone from my organization, Jamie Sullivan, who's on my side, the liaison with Zoom, and Zoom is constantly changing as a platform, trying to be competitive with the several other video conferencing platforms. And so Jamie is on the phone all the time with Zoom, talking to technical resource people and trying to keep up with what's happening. So I want to thank her, and she'll be with us should something unexpected happen, like my losing Wi-Fi and, you know, things like that happen. Jamie is equipped to run the slides I'll be showing and so on. So let's talk briefly about what we'll be doing over the next 3 hours, and also on the 18th. We are creating a rich reservoir of information, ideas, concepts, questions, in a very free-flowing fashion. So at the end of our 3 hours today, we will have generated a tremendous amount of information. If we were in a room together, which I so wish we were, a real one, you'd see the chart sheets taped all over the walls, and you'd realize how much good stuff we're generating. Well, here's what I want you to know so you don't worry about it. Don't get uptight, please. We will use everything we're generating. I'm under contract to follow through on this meeting, to write an action report with a set of recommendations. And in writing that action report, I will be drawing on all the work we will be doing today and on Thursday. And it will be recorded. We're being recorded actually right now. All breakout group reports will be recorded. And we will have all of the breakout group notes in an appendix to the action report. So nothing will be written on sand. Everything you say will be memorialized and not just tossed out and forgotten. Now, there are 3 features of this meeting. I want to tell you just a bit about this meeting that the steering committee has developed with my assistance. There are 3 key features I want you to keep in mind. Number 1, this is a board development and board superintendent partnership building occasion. You are the people. My name for you is the strategic governing team, all of you who are participating. And your collective job is to help a good board get better, and to make sure that this very precious relationship between the board and its new chief executive officer, relatively new chief executive officer, is productive, close, remains very positive, and enduring. And there's a principle behind this. My friends, it is your board. It is your board. It doesn't belong to anyone else. Make it everything it can be as a governing body. That's it. That's your job, and I'm joining you today, so I guess I can say our job. Second, this is a board-driven meeting. It's not a training session, God forbid. It should be that. You can't sit through more training. So we have a board-driven meeting, 6 breakout groups led by board members. So all of the information we generate over the course of 6 hours together, 3 today and 3 on Thursday, is going to be very driven by board leaders leading breakout groups. And the steering committee was adamant that that should be the case. And third, we represent, and you're going to hear this term, you've already heard it, you're going to hear it again a couple of times. We're a team. And that's another key feature of this meeting. The team is here. The strategic governing team. It's a team sport, governing. It can't be we, they. It's not executives over here and board members over there and the twain don't meet. My friends, the twain meet every day in every way around tables making governing decisions and judgments. That's the business of governing. Around the table, Mark and his team, Dodgy and her governing team on the board. So let's talk a minute about the breakout group process. That's another thing I'm expected to brief you on, and Jamie will tell you a little bit about the mechanics of this process. It gets kind of complex with Zoom, but I think it's going to work pretty smoothly. We're doing a classical brainstorming process led by board members. That means no right and wrong answers. And no debate. We don't have time for it. We're not trying to reach consensus. We don't need to over the course of 6 hours. It would be premature, inadvisable to do that. We'll reach consensus after this meeting during the follow-through process. So it's a very free-flowing, open-ended kind of thing. I think you'll find it very enjoyable if you relax. Let it flow. Even if you're a type A, and most of you probably are, that's kind of how we got here. We're not very relaxed people. We might pretend to be. But for the purposes of this being a very, very effective process, you got to relax. You got to listen and get out of the debating mode. We don't need any debates over 6 hours. So generate as many ideas as we can. Don't worry if one idea conflicts with another idea, That's fine. That's life. We'll figure out how to reconcile differences after our 6 hours together. We're asking breakout group leaders, and you all been assigned to breakout groups, and Jamie will tell you how that process works, but I think you all got your assignments, so you know what group you're in. And we're going to ask the group leaders to designate someone in the group to be your timer to keep track of how we're doing so we don't run out of time, because we will stay on schedule, believe me, and we will adjourn on time. Your time is very precious. My job is to make sure we do that. But we'll have to keep track of time. And we need a recorder, and the breakout group leader is going to designate a recorder. And this is a very simple but very important job. You make notes while people are talking. Don't worry about who said what. We don't care. These are not minutes, but they're bullet points, so we don't lose track of the main points that come up. And so it's a very responsible job. The recorders will submit to Angelia their recorded comments from their groups via email or fax, either way. And then they'll also be recorded on video. But Angelia will need those notes from you all after our 2 meetings. Now, we're going to all come back together in the main room. This is the main room. We got 2 breakout rooms that you'll be going to. We'll all come back together. We want the leader of the group to introduce the group. Not who's in it, but just talk about the process a bit. Tell us how it went, anything happened that's interesting that you want to share with others. Did we feel certain tension at certain points over some of the things we were discussing? And the reason we do this is so we're all learning, we're all educating each other in this very complex business of governing a major school district, a major enterprise. And we should never forget, by the way, you are a major enterprise in your metropolitan area and nationally. We spend significant dollars doing significant work by a lot of people. So it makes you one of the largest employers in your region, a powerhouse. And by definition, then we're doing very important work. So we'll come back together, we'll report, we'll talk, and I think you'll find the process very enjoyable. I will be rotating from group to group. So I'll be with all of you periodically, and then I'll go out and come back and whatnot, so that I can be a resource. Jamie, you want to say a word about the process?
Sure.
Technically?
Sure. You'll receive an invitation on your screen stating which room you're being assigned to. All you have to do is select join, and it will take you to your assigned breakout room. At the end of the allotted time for the breakout room, you will see a 1-minute timer to let you know that the room is about to close and that you will be automatically rejoined to the main room.
Polite way of saying you will be ejected.
That's true
And
too.
find yourself arriving back in the main room, like it or not.
Yeah.
And this happens about, by the way, we'll break at roughly, I'm just looking, you all have the agenda, about 10:15, we'll take a break. When you come back to the main room, we're going to ask you all to come back by 10:30, no later. And then when we're all in the main group, then we'll get divided into the breakout groups. So come back together. We want to know everyone's still with us in the main room before we break out in the breakout groups. And I want to look with you before I do the presentation. I've been asked to do the recap about what's going on in the wild and wonderful world of K-12 governing. Let me look at each of the groups with you. And I think you all have, I hope you have the descriptions here. This is the lengthy memorandum from the steering committee by name. It's the description of the work session. And on page 4, you'll see round 1. 2 groups, A and B, meeting concurrently in their respective rooms. And they are setting the stage for everything we do in the following hours. Group A is our, you might call them the values vision group, the strategic framework, the strategic context for what we're doing. And if you look at their jobs, we're going to start with values, the gold standard for board leadership. I go around the country working with boards. I always look first when I'm assessing board performance. I'm always looking to see how much time a board spends and how recently it's spent that time thinking about gold standard questions like values and vision and strategic issues, the things we expect high impact boards to spend a lot of time doing. So we're going to first look at values. We're going to do a very simple process. Remember, no debates, don't get uptight, just spit it out. A value is a cherished belief. It should guide us. It should guide our governing work. And in a way, it kind of constrains us. Values tend to have a thou shalt not feel to them because they tell us, but they also tell us things that are very, very important. And we're going to complete the sentence. We believe in / we believe that. And you complete the sentence. So what are the cherished beliefs that should guide us in what we do? For example, we're an educational enterprise. So we could say we really believe in the equal opportunity of all students to succeed. No matter where you're coming from, that could be a value. I'm not saying it should, but to me, that strikes me as a value that's uniquely linked to our enterprise. But there are a lot of values that aren't just ours, like transparency, which is very important in today's world. If you want anyone to trust you, you're transparent, and so on. The second job we're going to do And I think you'll love this, and it'll have a very new feel, I believe. Group A is going to look at what's called an impact vision. Now, my friends, we've gotten in the habit of sort of poo-pooing vision. Number one, it tends to be a 2 or 3 sentence, little pithy sort of paragraph, almost like a slogan, not of particular value for anything other than marketing and image building. Well, that's a trivial use of vision to me. The most valuable visions in terms of guiding organizations are very detailed because they point us in particular direction. The more detailed they are, the more valuable they are. And we're going to do a kind of visioning that's becoming very popular around the country. I'm seeing it with boards all over these United States, called an impact vision. And what we do is complete the sentence. As a result of our governing decisions and judgments, here's what we see around us. Here's the impact. Here are the outcomes of what we're doing. So instead of a little pithy paragraph, we're developing a long list. The longer, the better, because we'll clean it up later and we'll reconcile differences and all those good things. But today, we just want a long list of everything we can think of that would be an impact. Some impacts are very direct. They relate to student achievement, student opportunity. Some impacts don't seem so obvious, but they're still very, very important. We have impacts on the management of this district. Because of a strong board, educational enterprises are less or better funded. So a well-funded enterprise, a well-funded district is an impact. Boards have impact on image and reputation. Believe me, they do. I have seen a lot of research on this. They breed public confidence. So you could say one of the impacts of this board will be because of us, because of what we're doing, will be that the community better understands what we do when we educate. Not only better understands, more highly values, and more strongly supports. So that would appear on a good, and so would many other impacts appear in an impact vision. And then we've got the question of economic impact. Well, I have to tell you, the evidence here, I do a lot of work in economic development. One of my market segments is economic and community development. So I work with development corporations around the country. Every development corporation board in the world will tell you that in the top 3 incentives to locate in a business in a community is the public schools. Period. Period. And the stronger the company, the more successful the company, the more that is true. The higher salaries they pay, the more it's true. Because people expect high quality public education if they're going to buy a home and pay taxes in a community. And so you can think of and all kinds of other impacts, the increasing tax base. Now, the reason we do this is not just so that we understand what difference we're making. We want the public to understand what difference we're making. And we want to make sure we make that difference. And that's why we do a very detailed vision statement, so we can audit it. We can actually look at it. What are we doing here? What are we doing there? But don't neglect the political aspect of powerful visioning, because it's hugely important and the public needs to hear it. And then we're just going to end this exercise by looking at the challenges ahead. What should this board be worried about? What should the strategic governing team be thinking about as we look ahead. And, you know, I assume on everyone's list is how in heaven's name do we make up for the progress we've lost through this surreal year, this challenging year that we hope never is repeated. All of these crises coming together at the same time. How in heaven's name do we make up for what we've lost? It's probably on the mind of every school board. But there are other challenges that we need to think about. And the more specific, the better. That's Group A. Group B takes a different look. And by the way, Sherry's, where are you, Sherry?
I'm here.
Okay, I can't. Oh, we don't see you.
Don't see
It just
me?
says iPad. Can you be on video?
Yes. Hold on. Let me see how I get on there.
Please, please. We want to see everyone's lovely or handsome face.
Okay. You see me?
Oh, there you are. It is like one of those. What's the game where you have a little hammer? Everyone's constantly changing positions. Now, Doug is leading Group B. And Group B is very different than Group A, and it might not flow quite as easily. But we are looking at the structural aspect of governing. So think of Group A as more the content group, Group B's more the structure group. And we are going to imagine that we have 3 strong committees, and we don't have these committees, but they're widely used around the country. So we picked 3 of them as a way of talking about governing in a different way. And what we're going to do is create agendas for 3 committees. And I'll be doing a presentation in a few minutes that'll tell you a little bit more about these committees. But we're going to look at a planning committee. We're calling it Planning and Development, classic board committee. Without a planning committee, it's hard to imagine a board having much impact, to tell you the truth, in planning. Structure is hugely important to governing. We're going to look at a monitoring committee, and we're going to look at an external stakeholder relations committee. And for each of these, we're going to develop agendas of issues. Looking ahead, an issue is an opportunity, it's a challenge. It's something you think you ought to pay attention to. That's the scientific definition of issue. A question you think you ought to pay serious attention to. And so we're going to do that in 3 areas under Doug's leadership. In planning, what should the planning committee pay attention to looking forward? Not 5 years, not 10 years. We'll be happy with a year to 18 months. That sounds reasonable. What should be on our agenda in a planning committee? Anything you can think of. No right and wrong answers. But I'll tell you one thing. It's related to something in Group A. And by the way, we don't care about overlapping, so don't worry a minute. There'll be some overlapping in these things we'll be doing. We don't care. That's good. Redundancy is fine. So don't think about it. Don't worry about it. But one thing we will worry about in the planning committee is how do we integrate after this extraordinary year, this tremendously taxing year? How do we integrate in-person and virtual learning, instruction and learning? How do we do that? What's the balance? That would be an example of an issue. It's a question. What is the balance that's ideal? We know we'll never go back. I won't go back in my business. I've learned a lot about the use of video conferencing. I've been forced into it. And I won't go back. I'll take advantage of it. So in planning, that's an example. You'll, I hope, think of 15 or 20 other examples, things that issues you'll be dealing with. In performance monitoring, they will relate to measuring things. So an issue might be, how do we get a better handle on measuring student achievement? How do we make our financial reports more easily understandable? By using graphics and things of that kind, technology like PowerPoint. How do we educate the community in the area of finance? By the way, one reason many people oppose funding tax increases for schools, and as you know, people don't exactly love taxes or tax increases, is because I will tell you what I found, that many school districts don't make a very compelling case for getting more money because they don't explain their work clearly enough. They don't explain their achievement. People don't understand the budget. They look at the budget. Oh my God, you have to be a CPA to understand a school district financial report. That's inexcusable, by the way. It's a lost opportunity. So these kinds of things, the Performance Monitoring Committee will be thinking about. And then external stakeholder relations, things related to image, reputations, relationships with the city of Birmingham, for example, and the county government, and so on and so forth. And then the second thing we're going to do in this group is say, okay, so if we had committees like these, they don't have to be these committees, but committees like these, what kinds of things would help them operate at a high level so people want to attend committee meetings? Obvious example, well-crafted agendas. You'll think of 50 other things when you're on a roll that will help committees succeed, but that's one obvious example. If you got really good agendas, meaningful agendas, powerful agendas, then people will be attracted to that committee. It will function at a higher level. So we're going to look at the keys, and then finally, we're going to ask a question. If we really wanted to make stronger use of committees, and we wanted to implement a structure, an updated structure of committees, we haven't decided to do that. But if we did decide to do that, what challenges would we have to overcome? Well, let me share with you one I meet every day. People don't like change. They pretend to. I pretend to. Do I love it? Really? I think if you really love change or frequent change, you probably need therapy of some kind. Most of us don't. So the minute you begin to tinker with things like structure, there's a likelihood that it will be sort of ingrained, well, I don't know, sort of stuff. And you'll think of many others. So that's round one. I think it'll be a great beginning to what we're doing. And now let's, and I want to make sure here that I am on time. I have 9:39, correct? Perfect. I've got until 10:15 to take you on a quick tour, and then you're not going to hear any more from me except commentary during the breakout group reporting. But any questions about the breakout groups before I jump into my last little presentation?
How much time do we have in each group, Doug?
It's in the agenda, and you'll see we got 45 minutes for round one. And with Zoom, what we do is when you start, and we'll assume you started on time, but only when we open the rooms will the time be set. So you're guaranteed 45 minutes. My job is to make sure if we start late that I make up the time somewhere else, and I can do that with no trouble. We built in a fair amount of flexibility. Keep your agenda at hand, this memo right at hand, because that tells you everything you need to know. And everyone received a copy of it. and we will follow it. So now, and I always have a little trepidation.
Hey, Doug, I have a real quick
Yes.
question.
Yes, Mary?
I think I understand this, but the notice to go into our breakout rooms will appear on this screen. We don't have to go back to our email. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
But you know what group you're going to. You've been assigned, right? You all received from Angelia breakout group assignments, and so you'll be going. It's automatic though, isn't it, Jamie? They don't have to click anything.
They will just have to click join when
Oh, they do have to click join.
Yes.
Okay, you do have to click join them. But you know where you're going, so click the right group, A or B. You will not be able to leave the group until you are ejected to come back to the main room. Politely ejected, softly.
And Doug,
Yes.
This is Daji. I'm going to be going into Group B in
Yes.
Board Member Michael's stead, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I won't be roaming. Okay.
But you will be roaming other times.
Okay, that's
but
fine.
Not today. Not today.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
thank you so much.
We'll be in Group A because Board Member Michael was in Group A.
Gotcha.
So you'll check on Group A, and you put her in Group A, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is one of those dramatic moments when I click share screen, Jamie, and up come the slides. Oh, thank heaven, they did come up. And now I click on slideshow. I feel tears in my eyes that this is working. There, whoa. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. Stop me at any time if you have questions. I selected a few slides and created a couple new ones that you haven't seen from a presentation I did on December 21. And I want to do a real recap just to remind you of certain things, and I will move along in doing it. And then we'll have a break, and then you'll be back to this room after the break. So at 10:15, 10:15, we have a break. We come back at 10:30, and then we go to our breakout rooms. So let's take another quick tour of a very rapidly changing field that's not a field. I said that to you a month ago, 2 months ago almost. I'll say it to you again. There is not a field called K-12 governance. If there were, our lives would be simpler. There is a developed field. So there's no real agreement. Not universal anyway, not unanimous, on what are the principles of governance and what are the best practices. I'll tell you a little story. I have learned in 30 plus years that board committees, well-designed board committees, are key to the success of any board, including school boards. Structure is critical. And yet, the other day, after I signed the contract to do an educational workshop, I can't tell you who, I won't speak out of school, but anyway, it was one of the state associations that does a lot of training around the country. And I was going to do a program on the board superintendent partnership. And one of my slides, they wanted to see my slides, which is fine. I'm being paid. I'm happy to share my slides. One of my slides was committees are critical to the success of a board. I know this. I got a call from the training director. Said, we are asking you please to remove that slide. I said, what? Well, our current policy is we don't recommend committees. I said, but my experience is they make a difference. Well, that's all right. Remove the slide. And obviously, there was not agreement on the fact that having well-designed committees is a best practice. And you hear that all the day, all the time, every day. A lot of debate. some of it pretty heated, like my getting a command to get rid of a slide. That is, I'm happy to say, a first. That's never happened before, but anywhere. But anyway, I did it. I'm being paid. The field is not only not completely developed, it's changing very, very rapidly. So it's hard to keep up with what's going on. And what makes it even harder is that you got a lot of bad information around. I call it insidious foes of a strong board and strong board superintendent cabinet partnership. There are assumptions about governance which are not correct, but they sound plausible. That means they're insidious. You want to believe them. They sound like they might be true. And I see all kinds of, one of the common ones is we don't have to worry about the board superintendent partnership if everything's going well and we're achieving our educational goals. So the district's functioning. We actually passed a tax levy recently and so on and so forth. Well, in reality, things can be going beautifully and the relationship between a board and superintendent can erode overnight. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that because of failure to manage that relationship. So that's an erroneous assumption. We don't have to worry about the relationship if students are learning and we're achieving all of our goals. So it's confusing and it can be sort of a dangerous field, this thing called K-12 governance. What's happening? Aside from the fact that things are changing very rapidly, what are some important things that are emerging? One, a new breed of board member. I'm seeing every year, everywhere in the United States, in every board I work with, transit, economic development, association boards, K-12 boards. A new breed, very impatient, expect to make a difference, not going to sit and be preached to. Don't send me big documents and expect me just to thumb through them and agree with you because they're well done. I expect to play a high impact role. It's a huge development. And superintendents and other chief executives who don't embrace it run into trouble with these new impatient board members. You can't have the old time send finished staff work to the board anymore and expect board members just to thumb through it. Number two, we know a lot more about governing now. So we're getting away from sort of silly kind of general statements like governing as policy making. It has no meaning at all. Absolutely meaningless statement. No content. We're learning about the nuts and bolts of governing work. Research is finally occurring. We do know that governing more than anything else is a decision-making and judgment-making process. And it takes a lot of design, a lot of process design to get it done well. Or it's not just passing a well-crafted document to a board. That's not going to cut it any longer. Number three, I've already said, it's a team sport. In the old days, people used to do training. God, I hated it even then. I knew it was a lie, but I heard a lot of it. They'd say, okay, board should stay out of micromanagement, slap, slap, slap. There's a hard and fast line that separates governing from something called executive management and administration. Don't cross the line. There's no line. Give me a break. Yes, it's possible to micromanage and be bad boys and girls. Of course that could happen, but it doesn't happen very often. And I'll point out to you when it does tend to happen in exactly 30 seconds. But the fact is, most important decisions in governing and most important judgments are made around the table in a well-run committee meeting, getting ready for a board meeting, and all of us are there at the table talking actively. That's governing. And we do recognize, though I discovered this years ago, but now it's widely understood. Most board members, I would say 99%, don't really want to micromanage. They don't want to get involved in administrative affairs. Really. They get involved when there's a vacuum and the board is underdeveloped. The role of the board is not clear. The functions aren't clear. The committee structure is not well defined, or it's poorly designed. All those things put together, and board members don't know what to do. And so that's where micromanagement comes from. You got really high achieving, really smart people, but they're underutilized because the board is underdeveloped. They're going to look for something to do. I'm the same way when I'm on a board. I don't want to micromanage, but if I got to do something to make it worth the time. So here, those are some of the things happening. And I want to tell you about this team just a little more. I mentioned the strategic governing team, the board, the superintendent, the cabinet. Well, above everything else, there's a job one I want you to think about. We're not going to talk about it more, but I want you to think about it. Think of it as kind of a job one. I call it strategic organizational development. We could call it strategic district development in a school district, the district organization. And here's what I'm talking about. And I want you to keep it in mind that there are two tracks of leadership. This is the team, the strategic governing team. One thing we do, you all know very well. The team develops this educational enterprise called the school district. We update values and vision. We update mission. We identify big issues we should be dealing with. We develop strategic goals. We develop plans. We develop the budget. And all of that content creates, in one sense, this enterprise. But if all we've got is plans, guess what? We're not going to implement anything. So there's a responsibility we forget. Another role of the board with the superintendent and with the cabinet is to develop our leadership capacity. And my friends, that's why we're here. This is not a strategic planning exercise. We're over on the right-hand side. This is a leadership and management capacity building exercise we're engaged in. And we're all here. It's the job of the strategic governing team as a whole. So now we're talking about how do we take a board? What do you do to take a good board up to the next level? What do you do? How do you do it? I'll tell you this, you don't do it through training. Training's never resulted in powerful impacts. So it's not training. It's what we're doing together. How do we build this partnership with Mark? How do we make it stronger? How do we assure that it doesn't erode? And then we have a variety of systems and structure we have to pay attention to. They're very, very important. And the board has to pay some attention to it because we spend money on technology, we invest. So obviously those investments have to come to the board. So that's the overview of this team. So what have we learned? How do we know we've got a really, really, really high impact board? Well, first place you look, the board superintendent partnership. A really high impact board, you're going to see a very close partnership with the superintendent. Now, in the wider nonprofit world, not schools, they're an exception. In the wider nonprofit world, there's an increasing number of chief executives who are actually on the board members. It's close to being a majority, sometimes non-voting. I don't mean a majority of board members, I mean a majority of organizations have decided to put their chief executive on the board, sometimes non-voting, but that symbolizes how close this relationship has to be. So I strongly believe in it when I'm working with my nonprofit clients. That's not coming to education anytime soon, so far as I can tell. Second thing, the board and the CEO, superintendent in our case, and cabinet, understand governing roles and functions inside out. It's got a high level of expertise, and the board stays at a pretty high level. Now, here's a one that is often forgotten, but we're going to do breakout group work in this area. We're doing breakout group work, by the way, in every area we're talking about today. But this is one that in group, I think round 2 we'll be digging into, and that is boards, really strong boards are managing themselves as governing bodies. They're developing the people on the board, they're managing governing performance, they're doing self-evaluation as a board. They're actually saying, it's our board. If we're going to be a really great board, we'd better pay a lot of attention to how the board operates. I call it board self-management. Committees are becoming widely used with some exceptions. I told you one story. I literally was asked to remove a slide. But the good news is I've never been asked by NSBA or AASA, and I speak at every one of their national conferences, and I'm speaking at NSBA virtual conference coming up. But it does occasionally happen at the local and state level. We are finding a lot of attention to designing engagement processes with high impact boards so that the board itself with the superintendent and the cabinet develop ways of engaging board members actively in process so that they help shape documents like the budget, like a strategic plan. They're engaged early, they have a creative role, they make a difference, in other words. And finally, you'll hear more about this later, and we have a breakout group F that actually, not just F, E and F deal in this area, and that's they really pay attention to the relationship with the superintendent, and that relationship is managed. So, reminder, what is governing? Not policy making, that's for sure, except a little bit. Governing is answering questions, strategic questions. Where are we going? What do we want to be? What do we want the district to look like? What are its long-run priorities? What's its vision? What are its values? Who are we now? That's budget. That's a very important question, our mission and our budget. And then finally, the accountability question. How are we doing? How are we doing educationally? But not just educationally. How are we managing finances? How are we doing managerially? Are we paying competitive salaries? Do we have high turnover problem? High turnover is a symptom of very serious dysfunction in any organization. Usually, it means something, either a sour culture or salaries that aren't competitive or both. So we ask questions, but that sounds a little abstract. So let's drill down quickly and remind ourselves what we do. Basically, a board working with the superintendent is a decision-making and judgment-making machine. And it's not abstract. We make decisions about very concrete governing products. And we design processes to engage us in helping to shape those products. Planning is one of the big streams of getting that done. This, by the way, looks a little bit like a modern committee structure because it corresponds to the streams. So, I'm the chair of the planning committee. I'm bringing the updated value statement to the board. We've spent 4 months working on it. We got a lot of input from faculty and and staff and the community and so on, and we're ready with the value statement. When the board adopts that statement, it's making a classic governing decision. That's governing. It's a concrete decision about a concrete product called a value statement. When the board adopts a budget, and most boards do, it's making a concrete decision about a concrete document called the annual operating budget. That's governing. When the board's monitoring, which is a classic function of a board, it makes all kinds of judgments based on documentation, reports. And so if I'm chair of the performance monitoring committee of the board and I present the financial report at a board meeting quarterly or monthly, it varies with organizations, I stand up or I present the student achievement report, the educational progress report. Board members are going to make judgments about how well that function is being handled. And that's wearing a different hat. That's governing. And in external relations, which is a key area of governing, when I adopt a legislative program for my district, and it may be influenced by the state legislative program, but we adopt a legislative program and we play a role, maybe testifying in the state legislature, I'm making a concrete governing decision about a concrete product. So forget about broad things like policy making. Policies are rules, and boards do a little bit of policy making, about 5-8% of what a board does. Every so often, you need to update an important district policy. It doesn't happen terribly often, but it does happen, and that's part of governing. And an example of a policy, actually one that causes a lot of heartburn and so on, would relate to starting times. That's always one that causes all kinds of trauma and debate in communities when you tinker. But that would be a policy change to change starting times at particular levels in a district. Drawing boundaries, always controversial. Redrawing boundaries, consolidating schools, eliminating occasional schools. Yeah, those are policy decisions. They just don't happen often enough to call governing policymaking. It's misleading. Okay, so quick tour of what governing work is. Let's talk about self-management. We're going to deal with this on Thursday, but the starting point for a board managing itself is the starting point for almost every important governing function, a committee. Without a committee, it's highly unlikely a board can really handle an important function. For example, you know the board should be engaged in strategic planning, right? Because it's kind of the gold standard for board engagement. No planning committee, very unlikely the board can be engaged at a high level because there's no committee watching over it. Well, that's true here in board self-management. And so many boards around the country have a governance or board operations committee. Somewhere down the pike, we'll think about whether we want one. And it specifically is the Committee on Board Operations. Manages the relationship with the superintendent, your chief executive, and it handles board self-management, the development of the people on the board and the management of the governing process. It does the self-assessment of the board. And when you talk about this, and when we do the breakout groups in this area, we'll be talking about how we develop the people on the board and how the people work together and how do we manage the board's governing performance. And the people on the board, and we'll actually do this later in a breakout group, how do we orient board members? New board members, when they join the board, how do we get them up to speed? Ironically, I'm sorry to report that many boards spend more time talking about administrative functions in the orientation than they talk about governing. You join a board to govern, not manage a district. So you would expect that roughly 75% of an orientation for new board members would focus on the board's role, the board's functions, the board's structure, the board's engagement processes. But very often more focus is paid to facilities, the budget, finances, where our revenues come from, blah, blah, blah. In other words, a management-focused evaluation. It's one of the reasons boards have not developed very often into strong governing bodies. And then, okay, you got the bodies, you've oriented them. How do we keep them up to speed in governing? And we have a breakout group that's going to do that. What kind of program do we need to continuously strengthen our knowledge and our skills in the area of governing? Just remember, your business is governing as a board. It's a changing field, very complex, very, very complex, very difficult work to do. And it takes a lot of development. And we also have to pay attention of how we interact with each other, how we communicate. And that's part of the self-management process. Now, in terms of performance management, no big deal. We'll have a breakout group that talks about performance targets that we think we should hold ourselves accountable for. And they aren't fancy very often. How about the big A word? Attendance. Bottom line, if you don't attend board and committee meetings, you're underperforming as a board member. Many boards, every board I work with, that would be the case. It appears on the performance targets. Should you come prepared for board meetings? Read the material? Yeah, maybe so. That would appear on the list. So we can hand new board members a set of performance expectations. Boards get better that way. And we might have some non-governing performance. That would mean something which, strictly speaking, is not a decision or a judgment, but it's important, and you decide the board should play some role in it. It's your decision, it's your board. Many boards I'm working with have speakers bureaus for the board, and they do a real good job of booking board members to speak in the community and widely in the community. I strongly believe in it, strongly. Well, that would be called a non-governing target. Welcome to the board. We do expect you every quarter somewhere, no big fancy thing, but we'll book you to speak somewhere in the community. And a community as diverse and large as Birmingham, there are plenty of opportunities to represent the district. This is a large and very diverse community, all kinds of organizations. And so we could do that. Also, should board members attend certain events? Well, I don't know, it's up to you. Graduation exercises are often assigned to board members. You know, we want to see you. We want to see you at ribbon cuttings. You open a new facility. And then we should have an evaluation process. And so this is what we call board self-management. It's not a fancy or a complex process, but I will tell you, it does make boards better, just paying attention to it. Committees, just to remind you, there are well-designed committees, there are poorly designed committees. I would tell Mark offline that his relationship with the board could easily be damaged by a badly designed committee structure. I say this to a lot of superintendents. I do one-on-one coaching having to do with the board chief executive partnership. And that's one of the first things I say, look, if you've got an old-fashioned committee structure, it's going to be difficult to build a partnership. So your design principle is committees should be very broad and focus on broad governing functions, not silos that focus on administrative functions, because that gets the board into the weeds. You do not want a curriculum committee of a board. Believe me. You do not want a human resource management committee of a board. That's an administrative function, it's not a governing function. You might have a finance committee, but I don't recommend it. It's too narrow. It could be part of a performance monitoring committee. And you definitely, in fact, it's almost comical to have a buildings and grounds committee, because that doesn't even have half an ounce of governing. So the point is, move to broad, stable, standing committees. And for really small boards, you might use a committee of the whole approach. I have some clients that do that. I doubt it fits you, but it's always an option. I have a board right now where they have a committee of the whole, a school board, a committee of the whole meeting once a month. That's the whole board together, but they divide it into 3 committee segments, each chaired by a different board member. So they get some benefits of well-designed committees, but they don't have true standalone committees meeting at different times. Just a variation on the theme. It works, and it's something to consider. Whoa, there it is. Now, I don't care about the titles, but the thing this demonstrates is each of these committees is very broad. Each of these committees corresponds to a broad governing function. Areas where the board is making decisions and judgments, where the board is engaged. They're not administrative categories, which invite micromanagement. And we're going to close now on schedule, and then we'll take our break. I think we're still on schedule. We're due for a break. Try to pay close attention to this at 10:15, and I think we got another 3 or 4 minutes, right? So I just want to point out that one of the keys to maintaining a really strong relationship, an enduring, solid relationship between your board and your chief executive, the superintendent, is to have a modern, well-designed process for board evaluation. And let me say very candidly, very bluntly to you, it cannot be a questionnaire that is filled out in the privacy of board members' individual offices or dens or at the kitchen table or wherever. Serious evaluation is not done by filling out questionnaires. Questionnaires tend to evaluate process things. How good are you at this function or that function? They miss the only important ingredient, and that's outcomes and district performance. That's what needs to be measured. And that takes a lot of time around the table to talk about and make sure you got the right ones. So we want a standing committee to be in charge of it. And it needs to be a well-designed, outcomes-focused process. Now, there are other ingredients to the keeping the relationship healthy, but I would say evaluation tops the list. I also talked about having a board committee already, and that's important. And also paying a lot of attention to communication guidelines for whether Mark meets one-on-one with every board member every quarter, that kind of thing, and so on and so forth. But let's close here in the 1 minute we have left by looking at evaluation. I've already said, focus on outcomes, things that are measurable at 2 levels. One is overall district performance, as defined usually in your annual operating plan and budget. That's where you typically expect performance objectives to be defined. And do we make it or not? Mark's your chief executive. He's responsible for those being achieved and to direct his staff so that they are achieved, whatever they are. But you've got another level. And we have a breakout group that's going to talk about this. It's a very exciting development in recent years. Mark has discretion about how he uses his time. And Group F is going to have a dialogue with Mark, and he has some preparation to do. I'm sure he's aware of that for Group F, because these are what we call chief executive centric targets. That means Mark has decided to devote special time and attention to certain aspects of his job as chief executive. And they tend to fall in these categories. And that's what we'll be talking about on Thursday. So Mark could say, for example, one of my top priorities the first quarter of the next year is implementing making sure the new board committee structure we've agreed to create is implemented. It's a top priority of mine. That means I'm going to pay a lot of personal attention to it. I'm going to devote extra time to it. It could relate to internal management. Mark could say, there's a management function that needs very special attention. I'm going to personally play a huge role in recruiting someone new to head that function. And I'm going to pay a lot of attention to developing procedures and systems. It's not going to just be delegated. It's top priority in the area of educational leadership. Mark could say, I'm not saying he should say or will say, but he could say, you know, at the top of my list going forward as we approach a new school year will be, and this is a top priority of mine, we're going to develop a new model that integrates virtual and in-person education. It's going to be a new balance. It's going to be a new model. I personally am going to spearhead that development. I'm not going to delegate it to staff. I'm going to pay a lot of attention to it and spend a lot of time on it. And many chief executives actually will come to the board. Now you have to come to the board as a chief executive. The board has to agree on what we call CEO-centric targets above all of the targets. But many are choosing particular stakeholders. I was in a meeting, evaluation session, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago, virtual obviously, but the chief executive, in this case actually a superintendent, did a great presentation on this and said, I am going to pay close attention to better ties with the business community. We need more business support and engagement in our district. And one way I'm going to do it is I'm going to get on the chamber board, the major Chamber of Commerce board. I need your support in doing that. I need your blessing, but I'm going to figure out how to do that. So, my friends, we've taken a quick tour, a refresher, if you will, of a very, I think what I do is, Jamie?
Yes.
I stop share.
Yes.
Share. Okay, good. There. Okay, my friends, you are at break time. We are reconvening at 10:30. Is that all right? Okay, so cover your camera, mute yourselves, have at it, do whatever you need to do, and we'll see you at 10:30.
Doug, you're muted on your screen.
How did I mute? You're muted.
I muted you because your headphone was squealing when you walked away.
Oh, it was? Because I turned it off.
Yes.
So I think it's time. I'm not sure everyone's back. Can you tell, Jamie?
It looks like a few still are gone. Their cameras are still off.
What time do you have, Jamie?
11:29.
1 minute. 1 minute. So, my friends, we've got a couple of people joining us. I want to mention while we're waiting quickly, we were talking about CEO-centric targets, and it's a coming thing in evaluation, moving away from the old-time questionnaire kind of approach. But one of the best, I don't read many management or business books. I don't think they're very inspiring, but one of the best I've ever read, I want to mention, is Bob Iger's book about his time as chief executive at Disney, a fabulously successful company before the pandemic hit, suffering now, of course. But what made me think of Bob Iger, and it's a very, very well written book, is that he negotiated with his board that he would himself personally spearhead the development of new platform streaming. He would develop, Disney was hopelessly behind Netflix and other streaming services. It was behind in both content as generation as well as the platform itself. And so he did this extraordinary thing of negotiating with Steve Jobs himself to buy Pixar. He negotiated with George Lucas in developing in buying Lucasfilm, literally buying Lucasfilm. And Disney made all these acquisitions. And he spearheaded that. So any of you who are really interested in chief executive leadership or senior executive leadership, remarkably well done book and easy read to boot. But it's very interesting if you've watched, if you pay attention. Of course, all the Disney parks have been closed, and that's their largest revenue stream. But the one revenue stream that's kept them from going bankrupt is what he spearheaded. Disney streaming service is fabulously profitable. It's the only major income stream Disney has now. And so the power of that sort of focus, a chief executive, yes, is responsible for the whole shop. That's not good enough because there are certain issues that demand chief executive personal attention. And that's what we'll be talking about in group F. Everything's not equal. So what's going to make this good? Okay, cabinet members, participate actively. We do not need any observers. So if you are a staff member, we expect you to participate very actively. Do not defer to board members. Or if you do sit back and defer, you'll reduce the effectiveness of the process by probably half. We got a lot of very bright, very experienced people, and I'm very serious in what I'm saying. We participate as equals, and we're on a first name basis with no exceptions, symbolizing that. Okay? Any disagreement? Okay, we're on a first name basis. I see our board president shaking her head yes, and I was worried that I had her agreement. First names, equal engagement. Okay, I'll see you all. Jamie, what happens now?
I am opening the rooms now.
Please join the correct group or you will be put in counseling. Angelia?
Yes. I'm going to go to B.
Yes,
B,
ma'am.
you got to join it. There's a little button next to group B that says join. There.
Yay! It worked.
Is everyone in a group?
Yes, it worked.
Can I X out of the box now?
Well, you're going to need it to join which group you want to go.
Okay. Okay. That's good.
Look at all these notes just to make sure it worked. I was so worried.
It worked. It worked.
Yay.
That's good. Great.
Okay, go join.
Okay, but let's talk about it. I think we're offline, are we not? I hope.
Well, I mean, we're only here, yes.
Okay, but no one can hear us talking.
No.
I didn't see any glitches at all, did you?
No. Ugh.
Very well.
Yes.
So thank you for your support, and I think it was worth the effort.
Yes.
Because we'll be doing, believe me, others. We're not out of the COVID thing, probably, even in the fall. It's not at all certain.
Right.
We'll be out by summer. So if I'm going to be doing meetings, if we're going to be doing meetings like this, it's going to be Zoom.
Yes.
So, okay.
Well,
you feel
go
free
join your groups and have fun.
Okay, you feel free to do whatever you want to do. Now, when I join, I'm going to join, I think, B. But there'll be something that allows me to leave B freely. No one else will see it, right?
Correct. And if you don't see it on your screen, you go down to breakout rooms and the box will pop up again.
Okay, and then what will happen?
You can join A.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. See ya. So I'm joining B.
Okay.
Jamie? Jamie?
Yes.
Okay, I'm back in the main room, but there's no little thing at the bottom with the boxes.
The three
Oh,
dots,
there they are. There they are. There they are.
3 dots that says more.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Good.
I'm going to join A. This is going well.
Yay. Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Hi. Jamie?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Things are going well.
Good.
I'm headed to the next group.
All right.
Let's see, breakout rooms. So I guess I'm going back to B. See you in a minute.
Okay.
I'm back.
Hi, Mickey just came back and he joined Group B when he came back.
Good. So when are they scheduled to be evicted?
2 minutes and 11 seconds.
Okay, good. It's actually going well.
Yay. I'm so glad.
I am too. It is going well. So we've got about 45 minutes left. So nothing can happen now.
Don't say that.
Bad. Well, it'd be hard. It'd be hard.
Once everyone's rejoined, I feel a little better.
Well, they shouldn't have a problem. That's automatic, right? So,
Yes, but I don't trust Zoom for anything.
well, it's good.
Not after the last time.
That's good. Oh, I need to sit down 1 minute. I've been standing for the last 2 hours.
You only get 50 seconds and they're coming back.
Okay, well, 50 seconds is all it takes.
Here they come.
So I think we're back in the main room now?
Yep.
Okay.
There's Doug.
Here we are.
Doug, I just want to report that Group A is back on time with 100% attendance.
Wonderful.
We have met and exceeded expectation.
There we go.
We should be joining us in 20 seconds.
16, 15, 14, 12, 11.
Ms. Brown.
Hmm?
Now, you know, if we were having this meeting on site, we would have had lunch being delivered right now, right?
Would be.
There will be no doubt.
We're having a virtual lunch.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
everyone's back.
Great. Here we are. So, no further ado, my friends. By the way, I sat in on every group. I hope you're as pleased as I am. The dialogue was robust and very to the point, very substantive. I think you would all agree that we could have used another half hour if we'd had it, but alas, we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's turn to Group A first, Sherry's group. And Sherry, would you like to introduce your report back session, and then we'll, by sharing with us a little bit about how the process went, and then we'll turn to the recorder to present the results of your work, and then any questions and observations anyone has. So Sherry?
Well, thank you. Those in my group were Crystal Briggs, Sandra Brown, Jermaine Dawson, Terry Mo is absent, Janika Oldspeen, Sonia Smith, and Mark Sullivan. And I'd like to say that we had a really robust conversation surrounding our strategy planning. And of course, in our strategy planning, we address the 4 different pillars of that plan, which are student services, team excellence, and stakeholder trust, effective systems, and planning. And Crystal did an excellent job in recording the findings from that breakout group. And I asked Crystal at this time if she will just go ahead and address the things that came out of our breakouts.
Thank you. Yeah, so what our team did was we developed some impact statements around the different areas of the strategic plan. And in regards to student success, 4 impact statements were developed, and I'll share out. We believe that all students can learn at a high level. We believe when we create and implement an equity policy, acknowledging our own biases, that racial injustices exist, we can establish a practice and procedures that will dismantle inequities so students and staff can thrive at their full potential. And the final, that was the second one. We also believe in a holistic approach when educating the entire child. And the final impact statement around student success is we believe BCS will be the employer of choice by employing the best and brightest, which will in turn produce the best and brightest students. Okay, around team excellence. And excuse me, I have notes everywhere, so I'm trying to find those impact statements around this particular item. Within the same level. I should have highlighted those. I'll move on to and come back to that one. Looking at effective systems and planning, we believe BCS will have written SOPs for effective systems and planning that will hold internal stakeholders accountable using resources such as technology and data analytics. With looking at stakeholder trust, we believe in communication between the superintendent and the board to external stakeholders to ensure transparency. And again, the one, did we have one around team excellence? Team, help me out because I have scribbled everywhere.
Team excellence, I think that's what we, the statement was for standard operating procedures, and knowledge is often tied to the people when it should in fact be linked to a living document with quick updating.
Okay. And so that kind of wraps up our approach. We took each out of the 4 pillars and came up with impact statements to address each.
And that's what we have, Doug.
Great. So comments, questions. Now, did you all develop a values statement per se, or?
That's what we thought we did.
Okay. I wasn't clear on which was the value statement and which the vision.
Oh, no, we kind of created values to each of our pillars and kind of took that approach.
Okay. Okay. Comments, questions? Anything anyone would add?
Okay, I will. I thought it was refreshing to work together with having those specific goals. I think that everything that Crystal reported out truly is indicative of all of us working together to come up with those answers.
Good, good. So the process was effective.
I believe so.
In that respect.
Actually, and I'll add, Mr. Edie, if I can, what I learned is
sometimes call me Doug. Call me Doug.
Doug, is that sometimes you may think that your suggestion hits the mark, but others will make you think of things from a different perspective. So, you know, it really made it more engaging.
Yes.
Could you have used more time?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Could you have used more time?
we had had more time, we would have used it, but I think we had ample amount of time.
Good, good. Other comments, questions, not just from the group, but from any of you. Anything you want to add, any questions you have? Well, let me share just a couple of observations. And I think I may have alluded to this earlier, an hour ago or so. But you can think of values and vision in two ways. And I think it's very useful to think of them in both ways. One, they guide your planning. So if you have a detailed value statement, clearly stating what your most cherished principles are, what your beliefs, it kind of defines a culture, actually. Then as you plan, develop strategy, develop operating plans, you don't violate those values, or you consciously or you promote those values. So if they're taken seriously, for example, when you're going through a strategic planning process, you're alert to the fact that you're either not adequately promoting a value, which means it's rhetorical commitment, but not real commitment, or in some way you're inadvertently violating a value. Vision is powerful also as a planning driver, because you can ask for any element of a vision. What are we actually doing to translate that vision into practice? If it's a detailed vision statement, you can look at the particular elements of it and say, well, what evidence do we have that we're actually making a positive impact on one element or another of your vision? So it could be both values and vision can be very powerful drivers of planning if they're regularly monitored. And by the way, this is a strong argument for a planning committee of a board. Because if you don't have a planning committee, there's no structural support for values and vision. They're just sort of out there in limbo, but no one's really watching them. No one's really monitoring what you're doing with them. So they could be powerful planning tools, but they have another use you shouldn't forget. And that's in the area of image and external relations, stakeholder relations. Values and vision are a powerful way of defining yourself to the wider public. By sharing what you really, really believe in, you are defining who you are as an organization. And so you go out, let's say we're booking board members, and Group B under Doug's leadership is going to be talking, I think, get into external relations. When you send board members out to speak in certain forums, one of the key messages they can bring to the community is who we are in terms of our values and our vision for the future, what we aspire to. It's a very powerful form of communication. So you always have the two sides. You can take them seriously through planning, where you actually put plans together to pursue a vision, to embody values in what you do, but also in explaining yourself to the wider world. Well, great job, Group A, Sherry and colleagues. Let's look at, let's turn to Doug for Group B.
Thank you, Doug. Feels kind of funny saying thank you, Doug. Me and my name.
Thank you, Doug.
My namesake. I hate to say this, I had the best group. Obviously, we were very engaged.
You may have more for this.
Okay, Sherry. Okay, Sherry. But we were very engaged and just a delightful conversation, very resourceful, and we just covered a plethora of topics from the instructional models that we're using now and what we hope to use in the future, from virtual to hybrid and in-person and so forth. And we talked about parental involvement, the training that we're giving our parents to help our students. We talked about the stakeholders and the partnerships, the media and so forth. And of course, Cheryl Stewart was able to update us on a meeting yesterday with the city of Birmingham and so forth, the education committee and things of that nature. And then Walt Wilson, our new board member, he was asking questions about finances and funding and so forth. And we're able to lead him in the right way to get him the knowledge he needs so that he can have an understanding of the debt structure and so forth of the schools in the district, in particular his district. So basically, we had a great conversation, and we were, after Parchment was our recorder, and Mary Baum kept us on time and focus, and she was our timekeeper. And of course, our members were Cheryl Stewart, Spencer Horn, Matthew Alexander, Walt Wilson, of course, Mary Baum, and Africa Parchment. I didn't want to steal too much of Africa's thunder, so I let her take the report from here. But we had a great time together.
So, hello, everyone. Our three, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So of course, our three topics were planning and development, performance monitoring, and external stakeholder relations. So for the first category, of course, planning and development, we all know that means, and Dr. Doug gave us a great overview of what we thought that meant so that we could follow a roadmap after that and talk about it. But that's planning and development, knowing where you are, where you're going, how you're going to get there. And of course, our vision for this would be to ensure that our planning and development ensures the greatest impact for student achievement. Now, I think that's going to be the goal with each of our categories. When we talked about planning and development, we talked about the fact that we have had to be in a virtual environment. We talked about how planning was important to be able to adapt and adjust to that, and to look at those models and integrate what type of instructional models we needed to utilize, from going from completely from in-person, completely virtual, to a hybrid model of in-person, and then of course back to completely remote and virtual, and to always try to ensure that students are getting the greatest impact as far as instruction. We talked about some things that we've been working on to ensure that we have appropriate planning and development during this virtual season. We talked about our new calendar, which is something that is being developed and looked at now to ensure that students are able to get opportunities for summer learning, which would be important to assist with any loss in learning as a result of the pandemic. We talked about ensuring that when we look at planning and development, that we always be mindful of our strategic plan, which is there as a roadmap. We also talked about not just providing those resources for students and teachers as far as computers and connectivity, but also providing robust training and professional development. And not just for students, not just for teachers, but also how do we reach out and ensure that parents have appropriate training as far as parent engagement in this virtual model. In doing that, we did speak on several things that we do have in place, which is our parent portal, different type of training sessions we've had for parents, but also what can we do more to ensure that if they are having some type of issues as far as knowing exactly what's going on, that we're able to engage and provide them with more assistance. We did talk about getting some type of reports back from our parent helpline and our parental engagement department to just know how many parents are we actually reaching, how many parents are we assisting, and to determine if there's always an opportunity to do more, but what exactly we would need to do. We also had discussions about a potential virtual school model in the future and what that could potentially look like for students who do excel in the virtual model. We talked about challenges as far as the virtual model. And of course, mental health situations wherein students may need more mental health support as it relates to being in a virtual model and dealing with the pandemic. And finally, we talked about financial resources, ensuring that financial resources are budgeted and directed towards planning and development to ensure when we plan and develop, so that we can ensure that an adequate amount of finances are directed specifically towards teaching and learning and student achievement. Our second category, and if I'm talking too fast, just tell me to slow down, but I'm trying to get through all of them. Our second category was performance monitoring. And of course, our overview for this means, how do we measure our finances, our staff turnover, our capital improvements, our certified teachers, and just basically, how do we monitor what type of impact we're having on student achievement? And of course, the vision is always to have the greatest impact towards student achievement. And so in doing that, are we monitoring these things, and what areas do we need to improve in? One of the things we talked about was, with us being in a virtual model, being able to monitor student attendance daily, how interactive students are being, and maybe looking at tangible things that we receive back from students to know they're actually connecting and we're actually touching students. We talked about measuring tools that are in place already. Of course, we talked about the state end of the year testing, which is brand new. And we also talked about that third grade test, the readiness test to go to third grade. And even if it is not required during this time, us looking at it as a district is something that we are still reaching towards and still having it as a priority, even if it's not required by law. We also talked about assessments, student assessments, looking at, is it practical to have those in person? And if not, what concerns do we have as far as students actually performing these assessments without any assistance at home and things of that nature? We talked about not just the child as far as test scores, but the whole child, looking at a child who is college, career, and life ready, and making sure we're meeting all of those areas holistically for the child. We talked about CTE and things of that nature. It's life skills, making sure that we're still putting resources and time into developing that part of the child as well, because we do know that test scores aren't the only thing that, you know, is important when you're looking at educating children. We talked about, again, that ensuring that we're sticking with our strategic plan as it relates to performance monitoring, because of course that would be a roadmap for how we should touch all of these areas. But we talked about the need to potentially revise our strategic plan because of the pandemic that we're currently in. So that is another area that we outlined and went into detail about. And finally, of course, we talked about the budget when it comes to planning and, when it comes to performance monitoring. We talked about looking at our budget to make sure that we're putting the resources we need to into professional development. And what does that look like when the COVID resources are gone? So all of the money we've been receiving as a result of COVID, what will we do and how will we plan moving forward when that money is no longer available? Our final category was external stakeholder relations. And this, of course, is ensuring that we have partnerships with businesses, post-secondary churches, media, of course, our local city government, and strengthening those relationships to ultimately accomplish our goal and our vision, which is to ensure that we all work together to impact students and get the best result as far as teaching and learning for Birmingham City School students. In this area, we talked about our communications and how it is important to remain transparent, establish good relationships, keep those contacts ongoing, and more than anything, make sure that everyone knows what we're doing. They know the good work we're doing. They buy in, they want to support us. And I think Cheryl talked about she's been sending our newsletter out to the media, which is inviting them in to know good things about Birmingham City Schools. We specifically talked about Birmingham Promise and working with the city and ensuring that we strengthen that relationship, which could ultimately positively impact our students. Another area we talked about was making sure the board is informed, because if board members know what is going on with these partnerships and things that are taking place, they can not only support it, but they can go out and be an advocate on behalf of Birmingham City Schools and strengthening these relationships. And ultimately, we know that any partnerships should be in line, and they should have the ultimate goal of accomplishing what Birmingham City Schools needs. And again, that is to ensure that our students receive the best education possible. And I think that concludes all of our topics.
Great job. 2 very productive breakout groups. It's a great beginning. Actually, we're halfway through our 6 hours together, but great beginning. Anybody from your group, from Group B, like to add anything? Now's the time. And anyone from Group A too, do you have any questions, comments? For
I have
Group
a
B?
comment. I just wanted to say I appreciated that there was some overlap in what each of our groups had to say. So that's really good and positive.
That's what I was going to add too. I noticed that in both groups, we used the phrases, the whole child and transparency. So I think that that's maybe the most important things that have come out of our entire conversation, addressing the needs of the whole child and being transparent in the work that we do.
Well, you know, I'm glad you raised this question of redundancy because it is a virtue. Because really powerful ideas and concepts can't be kept down just because we've established boundaries for breakout groups. And I've found over the years that really powerful ideas will come up in different groups. You can't keep them from coming up. And so that's a very astute observation. So redundancy can be a real virtue. Other comments, questions, before I provide a little bit of commentary?
I'll just admit that as the timekeeper, I think I didn't manage the time to get to our last question, which was to identify the most important keys to effective board standing committees. I mean, we kind of talked around that, but we didn't specifically address that issue because maybe we needed more time, or maybe the timekeeper messed up a little bit.
Who would vote to fire Mary?
Sorry, guys.
Well, you know what? This was an ambitious agenda. And so why don't we do this? Would anyone like to quickly offer any ideas, any of you? If you did implement a new committee structure, we don't know that we will. I think it's probably likely we're going to tackle that, but we haven't decided yet. What does make committees effective? Can you think of 3 or 4 things right now? You've all served on committees, so you've seen what works and what doesn't work.
I have a question, Doug. Earlier, you mentioned that having a finance committee, you felt that was maybe ineffective or something to that. I guess my question is that what will we have instead of a finance committee?
Here's what I suggested. Not that you should not focus attention on finance, but that what many boards are doing is creating a broader committee that encompasses finance. So we don't chop the board into too many small chunks in terms of committees. So for example, a performance monitoring committee, by definition, whatever you call it, performance oversight, performance monitoring, there are various names for it, can encompass financial monitoring and educational performance. There's no reason to take an area like finance and segregate it out. That was the comment I was making. It is a very important function and must be well managed. So,
hey Doug,
can you?
I have a comment. To respond to what you asked, I think that what makes a successful standing committee or committee is exactly what we did. I'm sure Sherry, we did the same thing, but just that fostering of communication, everybody just really being engaged, and that input, that's what's needed. And so communication and just listening, and certainly as one of our members said, you know, we may disagree about something, but let's just agree agreeably, or let's be respectful in that regard. So I think just having that open communication and being able to be free, and which is what you wanted us to do. You didn't want anybody to be laid back or whatever. We wanted to just be aggressive in speaking, and that's what we did. So that fostering communication was excellent on our part, and I'm sure it was in Sherry's group too.
I think both groups, would you agree? Both groups experienced that. The power of working together in dealing with serious issues. That's why committees can be very, very effective. I do want to mention a couple points. And now I'm thinking about next, and I'm watching the clock too, so don't worry. We will adjourn on time. According to my clock, which is probably right, we've got 12 minutes before we are scheduled at 12 noon to adjourn, right? So we're on target, 9 to 12. But I want to just throw out a couple of suggestions for you to think about before we meet on Thursday. Obviously, well-defined roles make a big difference with committees. Everyone needs to understand a committee's charge, and it needs to be well-defined. But here are a couple of things I think of as calcium shots that they strengthen committees, that make them worth your time. I'm seeing a number of boards around the country that are requiring that nothing gets to the board in terms of for information or for action that doesn't go through and is vetted by a standing committee of the board. I would say that's true of 95% of the strong committees I've seen. That committees are a path to the board. There's no way around them. So you've got an instant empowerment of committees. Another thing being tried very widely that we want to think about as we move forward is reports at board meetings. The great majority of my clients' committee chairs make the reports at board meetings. And they're supported by cabinet members, but they take the lead in reporting. Instant credibility for committees, and of course, signals to the community that your board members are strong, capable, in command of what's happening. So it's an image building technique, but it's very commonly being used. Many boards, just one other thing that in this area I've seen, many boards will, board committees will have what we call a chief staff liaison assigned to them, or chief executive liaison to the committee. So the superintendent will designate a member of the cabinet as the lead executive for that particular committee. And that may be rotated over time to different positions, but it guarantees that a committee gets really high level, constant, consistent attention. And there are a lot of other things we'll be talking about, but those are some of the things that are happening around the country that are making committees very, very effective vehicles for governing. I think of committees as governing engines. And of course, among the benefits is board meetings become much more effective because of the preparation of strong committees. Any other observations on this? Anything else you can think of before I make a couple of closing comments? We've got a great agenda in store for you on Thursday. The good news is we're doing all new things. We're not repeating ourselves. We've got 4 more breakout groups dealing with different areas of governance in detail. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun on Thursday. And let me kind of recap. Let me give you the 5-minute recap of what we've been doing. We've been talking about board development, the development of the board. And think about this for a minute. The development of the board as an organization. Your board is by definition an organization. It's a group of people working within formal structure. It has permanence and it has a common mission to govern. It's an organization, no different than a finance department, no different than a pupil services department, no different than an office of the superintendent. It's one of the organizations in our district. It's easy to forget that. If we forget it, we can neglect board development. And boards, my friends, very often do not come close to realizing their potential. When you think of all the talent, all of the experience on the board, all of the expertise, boards are a precious resource, but they have tended, at least in this country, in the history of public and nonprofit management, to fall short of their potential. And I submit to you, the reason is we haven't thought about developing them as an organization. We'd never do that with a finance department, right? We'd make sure it was well-staffed. We'd make sure it had a clear job description. We'd pay close attention. So we've tended to neglect governance. Never forget that. We've tended not to take boards as seriously as they should be taken. Witness the fact that you will not find a course at the graduate level in graduate schools of education on the board superintendent partnership or governance in the vast majority of programs around the country. Amazing. Well, how do we develop the board? These are all the things we're talking about today and Thursday. Well, here are the levers. Here are the paths to board development. In summary, you develop the people because boards are people. We try to attract interest in running for the board, and many boards are doing that by talking about the board publicly, so the community is more aware of governance. And when you get the people, you do things we were talking about earlier. Orientation, training, continuous improvement, and so on. So we got the people. Second, we've got the board's role and functions. How well defined is it? Do you have a written, I call it governing mission for the board? Do you have a formal job description that everyone has for the board that's detailed, that you hand to new board members? Is everyone in agreement even on what it means to govern? And that's developing the role and the functions of the board, just as you would develop the role and functions of a curriculum and instruction department, of a finance department, and so on. Third, and very important, we develop the board's self-management capacity. We'll be talking about that on Thursday. Because organizations have to be managed and run, the board has to be managed and run. Otherwise, it won't run. It's no different than any other organization in the world. There's nothing mystical about a board. It runs as well as you manage it. If you don't manage it, it can run amok, but for sure it won't realize its potential as an organization. So we've got self-management, next Thursday's function. We've got structure. Every organization that functions effectively in the world has structure, and structure will kill you if it's bad structure. It's the key to success in business, but it's also the key to success in public and nonprofit organizations. So if we don't have a board well structured, we've reduced its effectiveness automatically. In my experience, probably by 60, 75%. If it's not a modern committee structure, if it's not taken seriously, if it's not well supported, you're going to have a board that underperforms. And then we've got process design. Now, all these things are related. They aren't mutually exclusive. Of course not. They overlap, but they are different avenues to the development of the board as an organization. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it because we need good governing decisions, but I'll tell you another reason we're doing it. We want you to have a satisfying governing experience if you serve on this board. It should be a thoroughly satisfying experience. You should feel like you are contributing in a major league way to the affairs of this district. And we can't get that without the kind of things we're talking about. So we deal with engagement processes. That's the final avenue to a strong board. So we say, wherever the board is involved, we need to map out ways to engage board members so they come into process at the right time, not at the end of the funnel. So that you don't get a finished budget without having help shape it. You don't get a strategic plan when it's already developed. You have influence early in the strategic planning process. That's what I'm talking about, board engagement. And so all of these things you put together, we do with other organizations, sub-organizations within educational enterprises like a public school district. I can't tell you why boards have been neglected. I honestly can't. They're so powerful. They're such an immense resource, but they have been neglected through the history of nonprofit and public management. So what we're doing is refusing to accept that. That's what we're doing together. We're saying, look, this board's too important. So we're going to look at the people, the structure, the processes, the roles, responsibilities, the whole kit and caboodle. Well, my friends, we are at 12 noon in Birmingham, Alabama. Sorry I can't be with you. I love Birmingham. It's a sadness to me to not be with you at this very important event. Angelia and I were talking about it earlier because we had all this great plan we'd put together. I can't remember where we were going, but way back when I was younger, we were headed for a really nice conference center. We were going to get acquainted and have a lot of fun and eat good food together. And here we are, little pictures on a screen. Well, welcome to Zoom land and COVID land, but you did a great job. We are going to make use of what you did today and on Thursday. Great beginning, feels a little rough to you, I know. Brainstorming can feel a little bit rough, but I make you a promise, there's tons of gold in these hills we're going to mine going forward. So I'm going to turn it back to our president and vice president and superintendent for any closing words, and then we'll be adjourned. So
Sure.
Dodgy?
Thank you all for attending. I think we all understand a little better what our students and our teachers are going through with Zoom calling and maintaining our attention. But thanks for everybody's participation. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Sullivan and Mickey.
Mr. Millsap?
I had to sneak out for an hour, so I missed my session. I can't wait to watch it on video, Doug. And I'll catch up with you, but thanks everybody. Sorry I was not there. Had an emergency.
It happens.
We missed you.
And Madam President, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I found our session to be very meaningful, and I'm sure that the other session was as well. So I look forward to what we're going to do on Thursday. So thank you to everyone, and thank you, Doug.
And thank you all for making me part of the fam for these 3 hours. I'll be with you and the family next Thursday. But be safe, and we'll see you Thursday. So take care. I think we're adjourned.
Thanks,
Dodgy, are we
everyone.
adjourned?
Thanks,
We are
everybody.
very much
Okay.
adjourned. Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a good day. Stay warm.
Bye.